clearly the right move. The rest of them I think just wanted some attention. And when the rest of the conference and Donald Trump clearly want to start doing things, that's not going to go over very well. So they folded awfully quickly. I think it shows that these people are no longer just pushing around the speaker. They're no longer just pushing around Mike Johnson. When he's got Donald Trump behind him, that's a very different equation for a lot of these members. And they found that out very quickly. They couldn't even get through one vote before having to switch their votes and come around eventually.
He's got Donald Trump behind him today. How long will that last? If Donald Trump cannot get his agenda passed, is Mike Johnson just inextricably going to become his immediate fall guy?
I don't see why not. Because someone would have to be the fall guy, right? Mm-hmm. But what was so stunning to me about today was exactly what he was saying, was the fact that people fell in line so quickly. And there was all of this buildup, right? There were representatives tweeting things like, this is going to go to multiple votes. And then when it came their turn to vote, they voted for Johnson. It was just a
multiple
weird...
votes. Yes, please, you're in. You betcha, sir. Yes.
And then a whole bunch of people who were just like, oh, I'm not going to vote. I'm going to wait till the end. Like, what is that? That's like just reality television behavior. Like, it's not real behavior.
No way. Reality television behavior? They'd be throwing down. They would go first. What's your take on how it happened?
Well, I think what is fascinating about this is how it ended up being so anticlimactic in terms of just being boring, regular politics. I mean, if you're a hillhead, there's stories about, blocking certain votes from happening so they could get off, into the cloakroom and make these phone calls and work it out. But if you're not that plugged in, it's like the Republicans nominated their Republican leader, made him the Speaker of the House, and moved on. And that, to me, is just such an interesting transition from what everybody has been thinking about with this last Congress and how crazy it was. This one, day one, pretty boring.
Okay, the last Congress and also the last Trump administration, right? I went into this morning thinking we had chaos in the first Trump administration. We're walking into chaos now. Except we didn't. One vote and he was in.
And not only that, the rules changed this evening so that one person cannot move to vacate the speakership. It's now 9.
Thank you, Matt
some
Gaetz.
protection
Yes.
there for Well, and what's really going to be interesting stuff. It may not be chaotic now, but you have such a narrow majority, the narrowest majority since the Great Depression between House Democrats and Republicans, where after a couple of congressmen leave to join the Trump administration, it's going to be 217 to 215 until those folks are replaced. So maybe the chaos and the drama isn't today. It could still be forthcoming in a matter of weeks or months.
And that's exactly what I want to talk about. Brendan, the House Freedom Caucus wrote a letter saying they only voted for Johnson because of Trump's upcoming inauguration and agenda. And Johnson tweeted his commitments going forward, and in it includes working with Doge, right? That's Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who want to cut $2 trillion out of the budget, right? We know there isn't $2 trillion to cut, right? In theory, lots of us would agree, yes, way too much government spending. They've got to cut. But when you actually tick through where they can cut, we saw it 2 weeks ago when they were talking about the budget. Once you get down to it, those Congress people don't want to make these cuts because they cannot get reelected. Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk don't have to worry about that. They're private citizens who don't have to run for anything. So how is legislating actually going to work here?
Yeah, and this is the problem that Kevin McCarthy ran into. He gave people the impressions they were going to be able to do far deeper spending cuts than were practical. And Mike Johnson is going to run into the same problem that Kevin McCarthy did. You have to get things through the Senate. You can sit there in the House of Representatives and say you want to cut all day long, but that doesn't make law. And ultimately, if people are expecting you're going to cut $2 trillion, and that's just completely impractical, at some point the bill is going to come due. So you mentioned the Freedom Caucus, and the vote, the threshold to remove the speaker is now 9 members. Freedom Caucus puts out a letter shortly after this vote. There's 11 of them signing it. I don't think it was an accident that they were showing we have the numbers if we want to kick you out at some point. And it wouldn't surprise me if come March, for example, when they have to fund the government, the first opportunity to do anything fiscal, and they can't do much of anything to cut spending at all, that this is going to come right back around, and we're going to potentially see a motion to vacate. I think you're right. Donald Trump will only really tolerate him as long as he feels like he's moving his agenda. Donald Trump probably doesn't care a whole lot about cutting spending, frankly. But if there's a bunch of grumbling and unease from the members who are most aligned with him, I don't know how long we can be expected to have Donald Trump bailing out Mike Johnson over and over again.
Ron, you're my fiscal friend here. What's your take?
My fiscal friend.
Right,
I've never really been dubbed that before.
Right, there's all sorts of, for example, Wall Street guys who talk about entitlement reform and Social Security is going to run out, and it is. But when you want to go out and get reelected, senior citizens are going to say to you, like hell, you're going to touch that.
Well, there's an enormous math problem here. I mean, it's as simple as that.
And there has been for years.
I mean, so cutting $2 trillion, no, you can't do it because non-defense discretionary spending is about $900 billion to $1 trillion, and that's the only thing you can really cut, and that is every service program that exists in the United States. Then beyond that, economists, as you indicate, have pointed out also that Donald Trump's agenda, if fully enacted, would cost somewhere between $5 to $15 trillion in additional debt added to the national total of $36 trillion. So even if you cut $2 trillion over 10 years, you're still going to be adding to deficits and debt no matter what you do. So there is going to be some dynamic math tension going on in really just the next couple of weeks.
I think it's weird how fast Doge has taken over the conversation about the next Trump administration, right? This is a guy who was elected to do stuff about the border, to do all these deportations, to bring back jobs, to do all this sort of stuff. And then Elon Musk comes in and starts talking about this Doge stuff. And as you mentioned, everybody likes the idea of cutting things until the cutting actually happens. Then they get really pissed off about it. And then you have a situation where now this is a huge part of this agenda for this Congress now. I mean, that thing that Mike Johnson put out today, as you mentioned, it's all Doge, 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 Doge. This is not just a problem for Mike Johnson. This is a problem for Trump as well. They're going to steer this administration into a conversation about how much Social Security should we cut? Should we cut this out of the school budget? Should we cut this out of the defense budget? Should we cut this program? That's not where they want to be. Donald Trump wants to get rid of the debt ceiling, increase, and he wants to spend a ton of money on doing things he wants to do, like big deportation programs and things like that. I think it's really quite an interesting sideshow to this whole process, how big Doge has become and how much pressure is now on it. This is the kind of thing that could make an administration sort of stutter and stumble in its opening days, if you ask me.
But this is why you're seeing Steve Bannon come out and saying, like, I want to tax the wealthy. And this is my new agenda, the full populist agenda, because he talks explicitly about the fact that there was the killing of the healthcare executive. He thinks that's a huge thing for the American public. And he thinks that Donald Trump needs to respond to this. And I think you're going to see a huge clash right away between the traditional Republicans and then this sort of Steve Bannon pressure of cut.
Okay, but Donald Trump has spent the last 5 weeks in all, I'm not even saying this in a negative way, in all his glory, right? Like he is lathered up at Mar-a-Lago, right? His favorite place on earth in a 24-carat bathtub surrounded by super wealthy people kissing his ring. Yeah. So there's no way, and even look at the people he's appointing, right? The number 2 guy in Treasury who's overseeing tax policy is a huge tax lobbyist who last worked for Microsoft and cruise lines, who knows full well how corporations can avoid paying taxes, but is not someone who's focused on the IRS collecting them. So that Steve Bannon agenda and that MAGA universe.
They just cut $25 billion from the IRS budget.
Yeah. But this is why we're saying today may have looked kind of calm and orderly, but that can't hold. It can't last because these factions exist.
All right, we have a new topic. Today, President Biden, the current president, announced that he is blocking Japan's Nippon Steel from taking over U.S. Steel. Now, a lot of people have views on this. Jason Furman, former Obama economic advisor, put out a tweet that was really surprising to me. Super smart guy on all things economics, but a far more aggressive statement than you hear from a Jason Furman. He called it pathetic and a craven cave to special interests that will make America less prosperous and safe. He said, I'm sorry to see him, meaning Joe Biden, betraying our allies while abusing the law. Ron, what do you think about this?
I'm very surprised at the verbiage here. I mean, I know Jason, and he doesn't usually speak like that.
That's what took me.
But I agree with him to a certain extent substantively that Japan is no longer an economic adversary. In fact, we're trying to bring them closer to the United States as a counterweight to China, which is an economic adversary. Nippon Steel is in the process, if they were to buy U.S. Steel, of saving the company, not putting it out of business, and maintaining jobs in the United States, and maybe even upgrading the facilities. So I don't understand blocking this on national security concerns. This is not the 1980s when we were in a fierce competition with Japan. Japan is not the same economy it was, 30, 40 years ago. China's the worry. So I would have personally approved the deal. And I don't understand why the Biden administration opposes it on national security grounds. And again, I would do everything I can to bring Japan closer, not push them farther away.
Okay, so here's what I don't get. The only way U.S. Steel, right, which is hugely important to Pittsburgh, to the whole region, the only way they stay in business long term is if they get some kind of real outside investment. So couldn't they have just said to Nippon, guarantee us no major layoffs and guarantee us a major investment? Not like the Foxconn spoof of Wisconsin of like, hey, we're going to create jobs, here's some shovels, and it never happens. Couldn't they iron this out?
They could. There's one prospective domestic buyer from what I've seen with Cleveland Cliffs, which is a company that's in the same business.
Who would take them out of Pittsburgh?
Yeah. So again, yes, there is a domestic buyer, but again, the dynamics are vastly different. Yeah, I think you cut deals with a Japanese counterpart that would make this more palatable from that perspective. But I don't, again, on national security grounds, I don't understand the CFIUS objection, which is a technical term for national security concerns in the U.S. government. I don't get it. I agree with Jason in substance, but not in tone.
And surprising was the tone for me. Brendan, as I said, Pittsburgh Steel is part of the fabric of Pennsylvania, right? Like Philly has a Liberty Bell, Pittsburgh has U.S. Steel. What's your take on the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the problem with making policy by nostalgia. That's what this feels like, populism driving our decision making. It feels like the kind of decision that Donald Trump would have made, frankly, because it's named U.S. Steel, because in the 80s, that industry was something that we were so proud of helping turn around. I can't imagine Donald Trump will do anything to reverse this or bail them out. It's probably in the same way that Joe Biden kept a lot of the Donald Trump tariffs. Feels like there's really no end to outbidding people on populism when there's no real sound economic basis for it. When Jason Furman talks about special interests, he's talking about unions. This is just a bailout to the unions there who oppose this deal on nothing other than maybe self-serving, short-sighted goals.
No sweat. Evan's dying, so we're going to give him a minute. Mary, here's the thing, though. I feel so bad. Poor Evan. We're going to give Evan a second here. Donald Trump also opposed this deal, but since Trump appears to want to reverse every single thing Joe Biden has ever thought, done, even considered, how do you think Trump could respond?
Well, I can't get in his mind, right? But I mean, he said Kamala Harris and Joe Biden all said that they wanted this, what Joe Biden has just done.
Yes.
So I can't imagine him getting involved. But this was about the union. This was also about environmental pressures. Environmental groups had come out and said they didn't want this to happen. So Joe Biden was responding to major constituencies that are important to him here.
But not any longer. I mean, he's
right.
Effectively, I mean, he's now done within a matter of days as president of the United States, won't be running again, has no future concerns about electability. So I don't, again, from the perspective in which they oppose this, I don't understand it. And I do think, given that steel production in the United States peaked in 1973, we should be looking at innovative ways to keep the business alive and keep domestic production where it is.
And let's be clear. Brendan, your original point of like, this seems like a Donald Trump thing to do, it's called U.S. Steel, it needs to be a U.S.-owned company, but Donald Trump is backing a very different foreign-owned company, a little TikTok. Trump is asking the Supreme Court to stop a federal ban on the platform. It's going to take effect. It's supposed to take effect right after Inauguration Day. What do you think is going to happen with this?
Yeah, certainly pulled a 180 himself here. It's hard to not look at these things and just say this is pure politics.